morning. Good to see you again. This morning we have a special treat. We have the Three Amigos with us. So they represent the three, what we call the three Western Abrahamic religious traditions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So I'm going to have students from the Religion and Spiritual Life Committee introduce each of them. And following their talks, have microphones here. So we'll just spend just a few minutes with questions that you might have. It'd be really interesting to explore these three religions, because probably a lot of you don't know about, if you might be Jewish or Christian or Muslim, you don't know about the other religions. So I think you'll be fascinated by their talk. And then up there, I wanted to ask if someone there's a microphone floating around. If someone could manage that mic for me up there, it would be great if somebody has a question, okay? So I'm going to invite Rachel Solomon up, lower mid, to introduce Rabbi Polokoff.
Rabbi Eric is the founding rabbi of Bnei Israel of Southbury, serving the community since 1997. He gives great attention to his roles as a teacher, pastor, speaker, and community leader. His interests and activities extend into the community through the Three Amigos, Connecticut Community Foundation, the Anti-Defamation League, and other institutions. Rabbi Eric and his wife Ellen are the parents of 2 Taft alumna.
Monsignor Joseph Donnelly, known as Father Joe, has served as a Catholic priest for the past 50 years. He has served several parishes in Connecticut, most recently as pastor of Sacred Heart Church in Southbury. He has also taught in high school, college, and graduate programs, as well as serving on faculty of seminaries in Connecticut and for past 5 years at the National American Seminary in Vatican City. Father Joe believes in service beyond his assigned ministries, serving as chair of board of directors of St. Vincent de Paul, Mission of Greater Waterbury, on the board of Southbury Community Trust Fund, and on the board of Brian Gibbons' Waterbury Homeless Outreach. He regularly leads religious retreats in addition to his services as one of the Three Amigos.
Imam Gazmend Agha is the Imam of the Albanian American community in Waterbury, Connecticut, and a university chaplain at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield. Known as Imam Ghazi, he served as a correctional chaplain for 2 years. In addition, he was vice chairman of the Muslim community of Albania, a lecturer at Bedr University, school director, and an interfaith activist in Albania. He is part of the Three Amigos, a priest, a rabbi, and an imam, an interfaith initiative in the Waterbury area, Connecticut. Active in interreligious activities throughout the region, he lives in Wolcott, Connecticut with his wife Fatma and 2 wonderful children, Jawad and Sarah. Thank you.
Actually, it was first here at Taft that Imam Ghazi explained, one of us is the good one of us is the smart one, and one of us is the handsome one. We'll let you decide. We've been asked, given all the advances in science and technology, what will be the role of religion? We will all tell you, as long as people are apt to reflect on their circumstances, that is, as long as we remain human, religion will endure. You might think us overly optimistic, but don't bet against organized religion. That was certainly the view of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. of blessed memory. And he said, "The devotees of the new man-centered religion pointed to the spectacular advances of modern science as justification for their faith. Through science and technology, man has assiduously enlarged his body. Through the telescope and television, he has enlarged his eyes. Through the telephone, radio, and microphone, he has strengthened his voice and ears. Through the automobile and aeroplane, he has lengthened his legs. Through the wonder of drugs, he has prolonged his life. Here again, we are tempted to feel that man is the true master of the physical universe. We begin to wonder if God is not being replaced in his mastery of the cosmic order. Dr. King continued, but before we go too far in our man-centered arrogance, let us take a broad look at the universe. We will soon discover that our man-made instruments are barely moving in comparison to the movement of the God-created solar system. So when we behold the illimitable expanse of the solar system, in which we are compelled to measure stellar distance in light years, and in which heavenly bodies travel at incredible speed, we are forced to look beyond man and affirm anew that God is able. For Dr. King, God was not some limited, passive force. The universe's brilliant creator and an agent who works through history serving the cause of justice and freedom was what God was. And God is necessary for us. Dr. King continued, we may feel at times that we don't need God, but then one day the storms of disappointment will begin to rage. The winds of disaster will begin to blow. The tidal waves of grief will beat up against our lives. And if we don't have a deep and patient faith, our emotional lives will be ripped to shreds. Now, this is why there's so much frustration in the world. We are relying on gods rather than God. For years, we have genuflected before the God of science, only to find that it has given us the atomic bomb, producing fears and anxieties that science can never mitigate. We have worshiped the God of pleasure, only to find that thrills play out and sensations are short-lived. We have bowed before the God of money, only to find that there are things that money can't buy, love and friendship, and that in a world of possible depressions, stock market crashes, and bad business investments, money is a rather uncertain deity. No, these transitory gods are not able to save us or bring happiness to the human heart. Only God is able. God is able to give you the power to endure that which cannot be changed. Let me repeat that. Dr. King said, God is able to give you the power to endure that which cannot be changed. In a deeply personal reflection, Dr. King explained that while receiving death threats during the Montgomery bus boycott, he was at his lowest ebb, afraid and exhausted. Turning to God, he felt God's presence and found the strength to face his challenges. We know that over a decade later, Dr. King would be assassinated by the purveyors of hate. Yet, is there any doubt that, like Moses or Elijah, he wasn't an instrument of the divine will? That he reminds us of our sacred purpose? From a Jewish vantage, science and technology, pleasure and money are blessings, but they don't offer the guidance and inner calm we need to make us all more caring and just. In contrast, the more we engage with faith, the more relevant it becomes.
Christianity is clearly, as I'm sure you're all aware, based upon Judaism. We are a Judeo-Christian community. We reverence the scriptures of the Hebrew Bible as well as the Christian scriptures. And so a lot of what we believe, where we base our belief, is based upon that solid foundation. So much of what Rabbi Eric has mentioned really holds true for those of us of the Christian tradition as well. it's interesting, I think, you could find a lot written and a lot of conversation that goes on, perhaps even among yourselves once in a while, about the question of religion, as Rabbi brought up. And then where does the question of religion fit in with science, with the rational life, with my academic life? Where do faith and reason intersect? Or do they intersect at all? I think it's clear in a lot of our understanding from a Christian tradition that they do, that they really come together and they are complementary. They are not in opposition to each other. It's interesting, from us, as is apparent, I'm a Roman Catholic, and as you look back on the history of our tradition, to notice how much, and again, the church has been big at building universities, creating places where we could pursue the truth, where the development of our rational understanding of things developed over time, whether it's in different universities or schools or wherever. It's the search for truth. And both faith and reason, which is to say faith and science and technology, both have a role to play. The problem comes when they cease to be complementary and start to, one, trying to take over the place of the other. I think that's where a lot of the tension comes in. Pope John Paul II of our tradition once said, "Faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to contemplate the truth. And God has placed in every human heart a desire to know the truth, which is to say, a desire to know God as the source and grounding of truth." I was told recently that there's some number in the teens of locations on the moon that are named after Jesuit priests because of all the advancement that in astronomy, for instance. There is a Vatican observatory. If you've seen that, and they actually have an observation high-powered telescope that's at a setup in the desert in Arizona, where they search out the skies and have taught so much and have been so much a part of that. Dr. Martin Luther King, whom Rabbi Eric also noted and whose memory we hold in a particular way as we continue this celebration of his birth, said this one time. He said, "Science investigates, religion interprets. Science gives us knowledge, which is power. Religion gives us wisdom, which is control. Science deals mainly with facts. Religion deals mainly with values. These two," he says, "are not rivals. They are complementary." Once again, the caution is where one doesn't try to take over the other. Probably the most talked about event or current topic of conversation in your life, if your life is anything like mine, is all this COVID stuff. I think COVID offers us a great opportunity to understand the distinction between faith and reason. I think we've seen, obviously, and been focused very much on science as this disease has been discovered. We've searched to understand what it was. Scientists have done so to figure out the vaccines, how we can control it more and more. Hopefully it's moving towards some resolve like that. But that is clearly the realm of science. But I think, and I would say this is, from my perspective, a real serious thing. I think there's another element that we haven't paid enough attention to. That is not so much the scientific part of it. What is the disease? What's the vaccine like? But the bigger question, what does it mean? What does it mean? I think although we hopefully are looking toward the downside of this pandemic, I think what awaits us on the other side has something to do with the disruption that this has held in our lives. And that disruption, I believe, has made us take a second look at and step back and say, what's it all about? What does all this mean? What did this pandemic mean? What does it mean that I'm not in control of my life as I thought I was and desired to be? I think there are loads of questions that we as a human family, and hopefully this is where I would see religion in a particular way taking a lead in helping people to reflect upon this experience and to understand the meaning that it offers, that the meaning they may find in it, we might find in it as we go forward. Because I would put every dime I have on the fact that we have a big reckoning to do with with the questions that will be ours when this pandemic draws to a close. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Dear brothers and sisters, early Islamic teachings encouraged and promoted the pursuit of scholarship and science. Seeking knowledge about the natural world was seen as the duty of every Muslim and also part of worship. Prophet Muhammad said that he who pursues the road of knowledge, God will direct to the road of paradise. And he also said that the scholar's ink is holier than the martyr's blood. Arabic became the international language of scholarship, of science, and Muslims translated important works from ancient Greece and Egypt. Huge libraries were established in big cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Damascus. This was also called the Golden Age of the Islamic civilization. Usually things that improved the quality of life, like science and technology, were encouraged and welcomed. These included practical things like navigational aids for travelers, geographical maps, medical knowledge, ways of measuring and calculating, astronomy, tools for agriculture, etc. One of the aspects that greatly enhanced and is enhancing the lives of human beings is technology. There is no way and there is no dimension of life today which is untouched by technology. Society is working to fulfill the countless futuristic dreams. And these technologies have resulted in a deeply connected world where time and boundaries, especially geographical boundaries, are bypassed and people from all walks of life can connect and communicate. Especially with mobile devices providing digital platforms for social media services, the rate at which digital technologies spread has been exponential. Well, the religious discourse on technology tends to focus more on what technology is being used for. So if we are using technology for good purpose, then you don't have to think much beyond that. However, a more holistic approach is needed, one that takes into account the consequences of the mass adoption of technology across the world. And we'll do an example, a game. We are a generation that like games. I'll ask you to make faces of 4 emotions: angry, sad, jealous, and happy. So beyond the masks, everyone, let's start. Be angry, and then happy, jealous, happy, angry, sad. This is what happens when we scroll on social media. And this is not natural. And as we know, we are doing the worst thing to ourselves too. Platforms like social media, and I use almost all social medias, and this speech is first for myself. Platforms like social media harms the addictiveness of the dopamine release that follows every like or view or positive comment. Enjoying praise is a natural human tendency, but an obsession with receiving more praise, with receiving more likes, is deeply problematic. If our life choices and actions are defined and determined by what others like and praise, how will we develop our own stable moral character? How will we work on our values, religious values, cultural values, family values, whatever we think that our values are? When attempting to use these platforms for good, there are often negative consequences too. And the game we played is one of those. So I will continue, because we have just 7 minutes. It's very hard. I usually prepare a long speech, because I have to speak whatever is left after my two brothers. Martin Luther King says that every man lives in two realms, the internal and the external. The internal is that the realm of spiritual ends expressed in art, literature, morals, and religion. The external is that complex of devices, techniques, mechanisms, and instrumentalities by means by which we live. Our problem today is, he says this decades ago now, everyone knows where we are today. Our problem today is that we have allowed the internal to become lost in the external. We have allowed the means by which we live to outdistance the ends for which we live. In Islam, internal life, it's very, very important. And there is a need for humility and conscious awareness. As God says in Quran, God, great and glorious, is He says that until you know what you are saying, and knowing what we are saying, being conscious for what we do, is very important. The Prophet says that if a man's prayer does not deter him from intendency and mischief, he gains nothing from God but remoteness. So dear brothers and sisters, everything that separates us from our spirits, from our minds, from us, everything that separates us from each other, from our friends, from our sisters, from our families, from our teachers, from our school, from our spirits, is not for us. And we should work on this. Thank you.
Just a couple of minutes. There has to be a question. I asked the good one, the smart one, and the handsome one. You can figure out who that is. That's what they go by. That just to address, we'll lead it to Martin Luther King Jr., but also to talk about what is the role of religion and spiritual life in our postmodern, technological wonder world. Does it still have a role? So some of you probably don't discuss religion or spiritual life very often here. It doesn't come up maybe in your classrooms that often, but you might have a question. Maybe you weren't raised in a synagogue, a church, or mosque. Is there anything interesting, any of these faith traditions you want to ask? Here we go. Get your coffee, tea, maybe something. I have microphones here.
And Bob, also before we do the video selfie.
I'm sorry?
And also before we do the video selfie.
Video selfie, yes.
Yeah, we use technology to spread the good word. Because as we know, and we all use social media and media itself, it doesn't usually speak more about what's good, but just what obtains more attention. That's why I think that everyone can play his and her role in spreading the good news. And we use technology.
Okay, so we can't leave until at least someone up in that lower mid balcony asks a question. That's the deal. Somebody's got to be brave. Someone's got to have a burning passion.
Is this on? All right. So my question, with the disclaimer that I know it's an unsolvable problem, I'm Bo Sansing, I'm a sophomore, is why does God make us suffer? And what can we do to deal with that?
The question, the great question that everyone asks. Here's my contention. God doesn't make us suffer. God doesn't create. One of the things that we believe about God is God gave us two gifts that make us like God. An intellect, the ability to know, to think, the rational part of all of us that we spoke of, but also then the ability to make free choices, to act freely. If you look at a lot of our understanding, an ancient understanding of God would be that God was like a puppeteer and he made everything happen. But I think one of the things that science has helped us to understand, and technology, is that that's really, and theology has helped us to understand it. That's not the God that, anyway, that we, at least I'm going to speak for the Christian tradition, that we believe in. That somehow God is wrapped up in sacred mystery. That's why I think we find a lot of ourselves struggling to understand who God is, but I don't believe in the God that makes people suffer. That's not the one that our tradition holds.
From a Jewish point of view, and this is a great question, and this is a question which also goes back thousands of years. And there's a book within the Bible, the book of Job, and in the book of Job, what happens is every easy answer to that question is kicked away. And so that there isn't a good and easy answer to that question about suffering. What we know, though, is, and here I would go back to the quote I offered earlier from Dr. King, which is also not only part of Jewish tradition, it's also Niebuhr. It's the Serenity Prayer. That ultimately what matters most is what we do with the circumstance which we are given. And there is an opportunity, in part through linking ourselves to God and community and others, extending ourselves beyond ourselves, to do something positive with the circumstances that we face.
I would continue with the same approach as rabbis, that it's important to define something, a feeling, and in this case suffering, especially in the academic work. Defining is important. Everything that helps us growing, it doesn't mean that it's bad. And one of the big mistakes of our generation is that we are looking just for fun, and we see that fun is not bringing happiness towards our lives. So sometimes if suffering will help us growing, that means that sometimes that might be the best thing that happened in our lives, and the opposite. And that's why people say that be careful on what you get sad and what you are happy for, because what you think is bad for you, it might be the prayer for someone else. For example, the noise of kids in your house might be the prayer of someone who doesn't have kids, etc. So defining what's suffering would be very, very important in this, dealing with this.
Yeah, I did make that promise, but if anyone has a burning question, you can ask it. Otherwise, okay. Enjoy your coffee, tea.
Yeah, so wait. Yeah, we have the video. Yeah, wait. Yeah, Bob.